Find things you love. Find things that bring you enjoyment. Fill your life with those things. Just do whatever it takes to keep your mind off your problems.
Well, shit, maybe we shouldn't have a mental health podcast. Hey friends, Christina here with a brief preamble. Just a heads up, were some audio issues during the recording of this episode, which were not improved by the fact that Lauren lives next to a busy street. So apologies in advance for that. Regardless, I think you're really going to love this episode. We bring on a past guest and talk about the internet and mental illness. And I think a lot of you will relate. We recorded this episode right before Christmas. Life got in the way and it didn't come out on time. So it's now finding its way to you in this weird in-between week after Christmas and before New Year's. Lauren and I will be taking a break for reasons that we'll talk about upon our return. But we love you all very much. And we're super grateful that you continue to join the conversation. Don't forget, there is still a pickle poll out there. The question is, do you consider yourself a people pleaser? And how does it affect your mental health? Or something like that. I am going to jump straight into the episode now, which is a treat. We hope you all enjoy and be safe out there. So, hello, friends.
Hello, friends.
Am I allowed to talk?
That's perfect.
And welcome to Pickles and Vodka, the mental health podcast where
our guests are allowed to talk.
Our guests have a voice, yes. Unlike those other podcasts out there.
Yeah.
And our guest today is a recurring guest, actually, and Lauren's friend of 20 years, Vikki.
Oh, 20 years, wow.
It's more than that.
It's more than that at this point. So this would be my week to pick a topic, but we thought it was perfect for Vikki to come on because y'all had your little sleepover planned.
Yeah. She just messaged me randomly like, can I come over Friday for a sleepover? And I was like, yes. And also we record podcasts on Friday and we want you on. So it all works out.
It works out indeed so well. I have a few topics that I've been dying to talk to you about, Vikki, forever.
Okay.
But first, I guess we should... Sorry, my phone. I forgot to put my phone on. It's my Taco Tuesday group chat.
You're what?
I'm in a friend group that meets for tacos every Tuesday.
I didn't know that. That's cute.
It's only been going for like 3 weeks.
Uh-huh.
But it's great.
That's precious.
Sorry, I smoked a little before this and my mouth is getting dry.
That's okay. We did exactly what I said. Split an edible and are drinking wine.
Perfect. Oh my God, this is going to get really interesting like halfway through.
Yeah, Lauren offered either or, and I'm like, can we do both?
A woman after my own heart.
I am a both kind of person.
Yes. Oh, that's another t-shirt idea.
Oh yeah, I'll have to add that to the list. I do have a list I'm keeping.
Oh, excellent. So yeah, this is a very loosely structured episode. Mostly we're just going to shoot the shit and catch up and have fun.
Yeah.
So how about where you at?
Oh, look at you. Oh, seamless segue, Vikki.
I'm going to lose my co-hosting job. She's so good.
Yeah, better watch out, Lauren. Your replacement has arrived. Okay, let's go. Where am I at? It's not been the greatest week. Honestly, I've been really exhausted from my own mental health struggles that I talked about last week, but also some of my close friends are also going through a really tough time right now, like crises, like crisis level. And all I can do is just sit there on the phone with them at the end of the day. Like there's nothing I can do. They're on the other side of the country. So it's just it really sucks.
It does, but let me ask you, because I'm thinking as you're saying that, when you are in a crisis mode, is it often enough just to have a friend sit on the phone with you?
I mean, it would be if I actually asked for that.
Right. But I was thinking, like, for me, I'm like, that can be like what I need the most.
Yeah. I just want to fix everybody's problems.
I know.
Well, and Vikki, I actually listened to the episode you were on. It's episode 135 if you listeners want to go back and, well, listen. But at the very end of that episode, we were asking you, like, how you're taking care of yourself now. And you said, I wish I had a magic answer. I wish I knew how I got here to this place where I'm relatively okay, but I don't. And that's kind of how I feel right now. Like, I mean, even though I'm still struggling, obviously, I'm starting to become more secure. That's another thing. All of us had, like, breakdowns in between now and the last time we recorded.
True.
We'll get into that later, how things have changed. But yeah, it just sucks when there's people in your life who are really, really suffering. And you're like, I'm really grateful I'm not in that place anymore, but I know that I easily could slip back into that. And I don't know. It just feels like sheer luck that I'm not there right now.
Yeah. Oh my God. My dad is calling.
You should pick it up. Pick up.
No.
Yes.
Absolutely not.
What if it's important?
It's not.
If people call me while we're recording, I always like put them on speaker.
Yeah, but my dad doesn't know I do a podcast.
Even better. Anyway, that's kind of where I'm at. Other than that, I start my new job next week.
Yay!
I'm very excited, kind of nervous, but from what I've seen, it just perfectly aligns with what I want to do, like in every way. So
very cool.
What about you, Lauren?
We're okay, by the way. I was just checking. My dad also texted me and it says, hey, Lauren, is your dad just give me a call when you get a chance?
Oh, cryptic.
Well, that's how he usually is. Usually he sends a message that is like, Lauren, call me when you can. And it'll just be something like, how far is it from Michigan to St. Louis? Yeah.
That's kind of cute. My dad signs his texts with his initials.
Oh,
in case you didn't know, it was him. But yeah, where are you at this week?
Where am I at? Mostly, I feel like the week has been okay. And I think we've talked about this before. Like, once you say that and admit it, then you feel like that's wrong.
I feel like a big sack of shit right now for saying that things are like pretty okay.
Uh-huh. The only thing that's given me trouble and stress is work. And that is just kind of like, usually I feel like I have a chill December because doing accounting, then I usually only have to start worrying like after the new year when taxes are hitting. So leading up to it's usually okay. But for some reason, there's been all these like crazy emergencies. And I'm like, guys, this is when I wanted to take a break. Why? I mean, that's like, yeah, it sucks, but it feels just like such a minimal thing to like my mental health is tanking and I want to die, you know? So in general, I'm apprehensive about the time, you know, like on Christmas Day is when I'm driving to Michigan.
Ooh.
Oh yeah, this is the last episode before Christmas.
Yeah.
If anyone cares.
I will not be here the weekend after Christmas. I will be in Michigan.
We'll have a little break probably.
And then there's the big New Year's Eve show.
Yeah.
Which I'm doing the professional camera work, apparently.
Wait, what?
Well, the guys have been getting after us a while ago, being like, we need like videos that we can actually show people. Does anyone know anyone who's willing to video? And I said, you know, like Vikki did last time. I'm like, I'm sure she would, you know, be more than willing to. I don't know if you have anything better than an iPhone you can give her to shoot on. They respond, they were like, yeah, have her tell us what equipment she needs and we'll rent it.
Like, I know.
I know. I was just thinking, like, if someone has a simple point and shoot camera that's going to get better sound.
No one uses point and shoots anymore, Lauren.
I don't know. I didn't know if saying, like, giving her a GoPro sounded too professional.
There's, like, just to get a DSLR that has video capability.
Well, tell my drummer that. Tell him.
Well, you should tell them that you have ample experience shooting for a 5-star podcast.
Yeah, I mean, if you're saying like, oh, we're going to rent her like $5,000 fancy equipment, I'm like, I don't think she's going to know what to do with it. Not that I don't
Fake it till you make it. Okay, so what you're saying is soon we'll have some professional video of Lauren in the band to post on our Instagram.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, Vikki.
Where am I at?
Yeah.
Who even ever asks me where I'm at?
We do. Well, so the last time you were on the podcast, you talked about your eating disorder and you briefly discussed like being on disability for a while, going to treatment, dealing with, the death of your parents and all that stuff. And you were about to start a new job. And I know like everything kind of changed after that. So I don't know if you want to pick up from there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been at my current job now since April, and it's going well. And
was that the one you were going to start?
I have no idea.
I'm thinking it probably was the one.
Well, you were going to be like a 911 operator.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
That's the job you were talking about in the last episode.
I was so excited to do that. I thought it was going to be this amazing, life-changing, super intense, but yet fulfilling thing to do. I was all in, but it was the most toxic environment I've ever been in. Because the other dispatchers were all ex-military, ex-prison guards, and there was just so much racism and sexism and swearing, and I'm like, what the hell is even happening right now? It was a very toxic environment, and I only lasted 3 weeks. I had so many people, though, saying like, oh, it's okay. It's such a stressful job. It's not for everybody. And I'm like, I wasn't even taking 911 calls yet. I wasn't even at that point in my training. I knew right away it was not the place for me.
Yeah, but you and I brought up last week jobs where it was like a toxic environment, and we definitely did not last 3 weeks, either one of us. So.
No. I mean, I think we all know how to pick up the signs of a toxic workplace by now.
Yeah, I knew that it was not the place for me. I'm not a quitter. I mean, in my younger years, I would have, without a question, just quit a job with nothing else lined up, but this was just a horrible experience. And I'm like, I cannot stay here. So I quit after 3 weeks and I found something else, and things are going pretty well. So yeah, no longer a 911 dispatcher. That did not last very long.
Okay, so how about your feelings? How about your mental health?
This is a hard time of year. So my mom died like 3 weeks before Christmas in 2008. My brother died 3 years ago, just 2 days before Christmas. So this is not an easy time of year for me, and I kind of cope with it just by pushing it away, trying to stay busy, not think about it, which I know is not the healthiest of ways to cope, but what else can you do sometimes?
Drugs. Like,
well, we get a little bit of those too.
It sounds like you're doing the best you can, which is actually pretty good to me.
Yeah.
Didn't you say like the first year you just didn't do anything for Christmas after your brother passed?
No. And I mean, we haven't put up a tree the last couple of years. I've put out some decorations and stuff, but just my heart's not in it. It's too hard.
Yeah.
And, it doesn't help that our family situation is real complicated. I have a stepdaughter who pretty much hates me, never accepted me as her stepmom. I'm just someone married to her dad. And I tried my hardest for years, put myself out there, tried everything I could think of to connect with her, nothing. And so I eventually just gave up. And I can say that she literally has not spoken to me voluntarily in years.
Wow.
Like literal years.
Yeah.
So it is a very tough situation. And how do you be like, ooh, yay, happy holidays. It's such a family time. So I'm going to Wisconsin to be with my family for Christmas, and I can't be with my husband that day because he feels too guilty to leave his daughter on Christmas, which I get.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's tough.
It's just a very, very tough situation.
But it really sucks when, you've been married this long and it's just like, I just got to go be by myself. You don't really expect that when you get into a marriage.
Yeah. So that makes it tricky too.
I don't think I'm alone in saying that I am also not feeling the holiday spirit right now. Like, if I ever did, like this year, I especially don't. Like, I think it's just so fake and consumer driven. It's just like they're trying to distract us from the ugliness of the world, and it's not working.
Yeah.
And that's not even considering all the personal, traumas people have this time of year anyway, like you.
Yeah, it's a hard time of year. You just get through it the best that you can. That's all anyone can do.
My therapist was talking about how, evolutionarily, is that a word?
Evolution?
We have, like, the way we evolved, we're supposed to rest during the winter. Like, the winter is not a time to run around and be productive. It's a time to, there's fewer hours in the day. And so you have to conserve your energy and, like, sleep when it's dark, which is a lot. And we don't do that. Like, we're still running around trying to do all the things and that we would do normally. And also, like, there's not as much sunlight, so you're fucking more depressed than normal. And it's just a nightmare.
Do you know what's crazy I thought of since you mentioned that? Have you heard that, I guess it's in our biology, that families used to wake up at maybe like 2 a.m. and just like stay up for a couple hours and then get more sleep? Like, that's like how our bodies are wired to work. And because they just went to sleep when it's dark. So, it wasn't saying like my bedtime is 9 o'clock. It was like you just woke up at some point in the middle of the night and they just, like make a fire and hang out. It was just kind of like, we're up now. Let's light a candle and read a book. And then when I'm tired, I go back to sleep.
I totally do that. So yeah, last week we were talking about triggers, including online eating disorder forums. And that was when your name came up, Vikki. And so I know Lauren is really excited to talk about that further.
Because I was part of this community that she was moderating. So, it's personal.
Yeah. So do you want to just start there?
Yeah. So I kind of inherited a couple of live journal communities from someone who wanted to step away from it. And there was a community called Eating Disorders that was unmoderated. It was a mixture of members who were trying to recover, a lot of members who were pro-Anna. It was just a whole mix of people in different spots as far as their eating disorder. And there was no moderation of that community. You can say whatever you want, however you want, post pictures, post numbers.
That's the one I was more active on. FYI.
Well, so I want to pause on the word pro-Anna itself, because that word, it's a descriptor, but it also has become kind of a noun. Like, it's a whole movement. In case someone's listening and they have no idea what pro-Anna even means, like, how would you describe that?
So back when the internet was...
So I was going to say, also describe it in the terms of like 2004, 2005. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the internet wasn't what it is today. And it was a relatively new thing to have people from all walks of life just gathering together to talk about what they're going through.
We literally had no social media.
And there were so many members who were deeply entrenched in their eating disorder, or they were wannabes and thought that eating disorders were glamorous. But yeah, there were so many members who were just glorifying eating disorders, posting Thinspiration,
asking for tips
and tricks. How do I hide my eating disorder from my parents? All sorts of things. And on the other hand, there was the ED recovery group, and that was heavily moderated with so many rules. You couldn't post numbers, and that didn't just mean what your weight was or how much weight you had lost, but it was calories eaten. It was how low your blood pressure gets. It was how many days you went without eating. So no numbers, no tips and tricks, no glorifying the ED or going into detail about your behaviors. So moderating that community was kind of like a full-time job, because there were only certain members who had sort of proved themselves as being trustworthy enough that their posts would just post automatically. And the rest all went in a moderation queue. And so every day you had to go through those posts and decide if you could approve them, or if you had to ask the person who wrote it to take the numbers out or to not be as explicit in what they were describing. It was kind of a big deal to have to keep up with those.
Well, in all that time, you are seeing all of these things that you deem unfit for all the other readers.
Yeah.
So you're taking it all in.
Yeah. And at one point, I went into inpatient treatment and had to get someone else to watch over these communities while I was gone, et cetera. And my brother, who I was staying with at the time for treatment, he said something like, "What are you going to do if you get better about your online communities?" I had no idea he even knew. And to this day, I'm too embarrassed to ask him, how did you know?
Mm-hmm.
But what he was getting at is literally how are you going to keep your recovery safe if your whole online life is wrapped up in eating disorders?
I was going to ask that, actually.
So how he knew, I have no idea. But
what the fuck?
I know. I should probably ask.
You should ask.
That is stone dropped in my stomach.
You said 20 years have gone by. I think it's safe to ask him how he knew.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, my curiosity is absolutely piqued. Because that's Lauren's worst nightmare. Is like your brother strolls up to you one day and mentions Peach or something, or mentions this podcast.
Well, that did remind me of when I was living with Scott, the shitty boyfriend, who I've talked about a lot recently because we've had relationship episodes.
Have you named him though?
Probably not, but
Do you want me to bleep it?
No, what's he gonna do? Listen.
There's no one else named Scott in the whole world.
Right. But I remember, and it's when I worked at the casino too. So we were very opposite schedules. He worked a regular 9 to 5. I worked third shift. And I remember you just reminded me of coming home once and opening up just whatever browser I was using. And at that point, it was there was a bar on the side where if you pulled up your history, it would be on the side of the page that you opened.
Yeah.
And so I opened it and that history bar was up, and I don't go into that. So when I saw that, I was like, he was fucking looking at my computer.
He was.
And looking at my history and snooping on me, and I never said anything.
Oh my God.
That's why you say that now. It reminded me of that. I was like, oh my God, I just closed it and said, I'm not going to bring it up. If you do, I will say, yes, I saw that, but he never did, and I never did.
Man, no one in my family ever found out about any of the shit I was doing. Partly because they didn't know how, and partly because I was really good at covering my tracks.
I mean, I know about that, obviously.
Well, yeah, I was a nerd. So, what made you want to volunteer for that job in the first place? Because at the time, you would have been in the midst of your eating disorder yourself.
Did you think you were better off? Because I know there were times where you thought that.
Well, I kind of just did it as a favor to the person who asked, who was wanting to step away from it. And I did bring on a couple of co-mods who helped deal with the volume of posts that there were to moderate. And because it wasn't just moderating the posts, you had to keep reading everybody's comments to the post to make sure there was nothing triggering in the comments.
Good point.
So Lauren and I were talking. I almost lost my job because I was on LiveJournal during the workday.
That was the soundbite we used at the beginning of episode 135, where you were talking about you get called into your boss's office and they have your whole history printed.
But she was explaining that was a major reason why, because she started doing that.
That makes so much sense now. I mean, that's still that is a full-time job.
Yeah. And thinking now about what my brother had said, I think I probably had therapists telling me the same thing. If you really want to recover, you cannot continue to have eating disorders be front and center in your life. And so maybe you shouldn't be moderating these communities. Maybe you need to step back. But at the time, they were such a huge part of my life. I wouldn't have even considered that. And I didn't.
And I brought up when we were talking earlier, because I just know myself, if I was in that position, feeling like there's also so many people in there, and, like so many people that need help. And like, I would feel responsible too. Like, I got to get this out as soon as I can so that people can, like get their support, and I can't disappear because people need this.
Any sort of community, you're going to have a lot of benefits, but there's also going to be a lot of pain, whenever you get close to other people. And especially if you're going through it yourself, sometimes it can hold you back or make you regress yourself.
Yeah.
And that just sounds so shitty to say.
Well, I see it in two ways, because I was thinking, like, it is good that you have the connection, because if you're in that position moderating those communities and we're like, I came out on the other side and I'm totally recovered and this is not part of my life, I'm preachy, then it wouldn't have the same sort of like empathy that someone who is like, yeah, I know this sucks.
Well, yeah, I mean, last time we recorded, I was taking a break from the eating disorder community that Lauren and I met on. Mm-hmm. And now I'm back on it. And the fact that you risked your job for this community, to the average person, I don't think they'd get it. Like how dedicated we can be to these online spaces and how real the relationships are. I mean, that's the thing that is so hard to explain to people when we tell them like these stories, if we tell them these stories. Like, Lauren, you don't talk about it. And like, that's such a huge part of your life. It feels like you're hiding like, a significant part of yourself.
So this actually goes into, I've been taking notes intermittently because Christina recommended the book Dead Weight to me. I did immediately get it and I started reading it. And she knows because I messaged her in the beginning, I was like, I do not like this, basically. And there are a lot of problems that I have with the author, and mostly I have problems which we'll get into, we hope, I think, to like review the whole book.
I need to read it again now.
Well, I will tell you beforehand, most of my problems came from when she keeps citing this one person whose book I've read before and said that she is the most self-righteous, self-absorbed, pretentious piece of shit, and she is not recovered, even though she like thinks she is and is therefore better than everyone else.
Wait, what author is she talking about?
I'm like, can I call them out on a podcast? Why not? Kelsey Osgood. I couldn't remember her whole name until, I couldn't like remember the exact name, but once I read it, I knew. I was like, fuck, that's her. And I looked it up.
Wait,
like,
who's that?
She wrote a book, and it was the worst thing I ever read on the subject. The author we're talking about references that person a ton. He keeps saying, I talked to this person and here's what she had to say. And I'm like, well, she's an idiot. So maybe don't take her at face value.
Yeah, we have to talk about it to get into reasonings and all that stuff.
Maybe the edibles are kicking in. I'm like, what was our topic? Whatever our topic was, talking about moderating and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
Like there's a point where I just got to in the book that really is resonating with me, where she is talking about the pro-eating disorder communities and how people's responses to them are to just like the company's response, like Instagram's response is like, censor, shut them down, get it out. And she's citing the ways that like they've actually helped people, even though, the media wants to portray them as like evil, sucking girls down into the eating disorder drain. And I'm like, literally, it's a lot of people's only way to connect to someone. And they would just be alone and possibly hurting themselves more because they had no one to relate to if they hadn't had that.
Exactly. And that's what happens when they, ban these communities. They'll just go somewhere else. Or if they can't go somewhere else, then they'll suffer because of it.
I made a little like list because that resonated with me so much. I was like, what are things that I learned that I never would have known had I not been in the community?
Let's hear it.
I wasn't going to do the whole thing, but why not?
Okay.
Let's just do it.
One of them was that there are forms of purging other than making yourself throw up.
Yes.
That was important because I was doing those other forms, and that kind of taught me like, oh, I'm doing something more serious than I thought. I just thought I'm not puking, so no big deal. So I feel, like that was actually a positive to learn. The other one that was important to me is that you can get your period at low weights and you don't have to be underweight for there to be health effects.
Hot take, but like, yes.
Because those are other things that, I was like invalidating myself because I was just saying like, well, you must be fat because you still get your period. And according to, like magazine articles I've read, it's only when you get like really thin that you start to have health problems.
I mean, not even magazine articles, literally like, wasn't it in the DSM? Like you had to have lost your period to be diagnosed with anorexia?
Both of those, yeah. There was a weight criteria, and I learned that the number one way that eating disorder patients die is by suicide.
Well, and that's what people mean when they say that eating disorders have the highest mortality of any mental illness. Part of that is suicide. And that's, I don't think people tend to think of that as a connection to the eating disorder.
Yeah, I think that's why it kind of like gets brushed aside and people don't realize how it's killing more people because it's...
Have you ever known anyone with an eating disorder that wasn't suicidal at one point? Either of you?
Probably not.
I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the last one that made me pick up the list in the first time is I realized as I was thinking about this, I was like, you know what? Because I started off like hiding everything and, like not believing anything is a real problem. And I get in these communities where people are saying like, well, I had to have my therapy appointment. I had to see my dietitian. They put me on this med. Like, I wanted to fit in at that point. It made me want those things. And, some of them are like questionable, but saying like it made me want a therapist is not a bad thing.
That's a good influence.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. That's what I do think of, like, when I struggle with figuring out how to help my friends who are suffering. It's like, if you feel guilty posting about good things in your life or ways you're doing better, don't, because that stuff does spread too. Like, you never know who's going to read it. And like you were saying, you learned all those tips just by reading about other people's experiences. And that's not only the bad stuff.
It wasn't like, I learned tips on how to purge quieter. Yeah. That's what people are putting out there, saying like that's what they're teaching them.
Well, no, like when someone posts
like taught me I want therapy.
When my friends, that are in recovery post a picture of a nice meal they had and they're obviously excited about it. It's like, it makes me want to eat more. Or like, I saw people struggling to pay for treatment and talking openly about that. And that inspired me to be more, start talking about my own struggles with paying for treatment. And, who knows, I wouldn't have made the GoFundMe probably.
Yeah.
If I hadn't
known that a lot of people have been in that position, and it doesn't mean anything on you.
Yeah. But back to Vikki's story, like as a moderator, do you feel like you did have a lot of pressure to like impact people's experience?
In some ways I did. And actually, when I became a moderator, my own posts in the community became less and less and less. I used to use that community to get support for myself and to stay connected with people who cared about me and cared about what I was going through. But after I became a moderator, I did not feel the same sense of freedom, to be honest, about what I was going through. So I very rarely posted myself.
Yeah, I did notice that when I was involved in it, and I knew you were moderating. But I was on her private journal, so I still got all the bullshit.
I mean, that must have felt like a big loss for you. I mean, it was.
Yeah.
It feels very like self-sacrificial.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of was. I took it very seriously, and I felt good about, doing what I was doing, and I knew it was an important function to be keeping that community safe. And as much as it got to be very cumbersome to have to be enforcing all of those rules, I mean, the rules were there for a reason. It was to try and create a safe space where someone who was literally trying their hardest to recover and to stay recovered could go and talk about their struggles, talk about their feelings without being faced with thinspo pics or someone talking about how many days they just fasted. So it was an important thing to keep the community safe, even though it got to be real. It was kind of hectic sometimes trying to keep it as safe as we did.
Well, I was going to ask, like, if you had any problematic users and like how you would handle that sort of thing.
I mean, we definitely did have members who would kind of try and push the boundaries.
It was me.
Wait, really?
No.
I don't know.
Or, like try and write out the numbers instead of using actual numbers as though that made it okay. Or, just put an X in place of one of the numbers, but it was still very clear what you were trying to say. And so there were a lot of things like that. But overall, most of the members in those communities were just trying to connect with somebody else. They were lost, they were hurting, and just to feel like someone was there with them, going through it with them, even just reading their words on a screen. You never know what kind of impact that had on people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you have had a lot of impact on people without even realizing it, even all these years later. We've had eating disorders for so long at this point, and we've also been part of these online communities for so long. I wanted to talk about that bizarre experience of growing with the culture and seeing it change and seeing how views on eating disorders have changed and treatment models have changed over the years, and how that has affected the online landscape. Because for instance, when you were talking about people trying to get away around the system by putting the X's in front of the numbers, people do that now on YouTube. They'll spell sex, SEGGS, or sewer slide, but now it's just robots moderating that stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So you just find a way, I know that it's not going to pick up if I put a star instead of this letter.
But that's an example of how it's kind of the same, but it's also different. One thing that I am always dying to talk about is just what it's like growing older with this kind of illness, because it is hard to find those perspectives even now.
It was really interesting, the point you just made, that it's this moderating is going on today, and it was going on before, but now it's AI, it's a robot that picks it up. Before, it was a person. It's just...
Well, and that reminds me, how on Facebook, for instance, you can notify Facebook that you're concerned about somebody's safety.
Do I ever? Yeah, it's happened to me several times.
Back in the day, there was not anything like that on LiveJournal. And so sometimes there would literally be posts of someone saying they were going to harm themselves, or it very literally was a goodbye letter.
Yeah.
And these were members that I may or may not have had on my personal journal and had any way to contact anybody to try and check on them. And oh my gosh, I mean, there were some really scary times where you were like, I don't know if this person is okay.
Yeah, you talking about that, I was thinking, I remember in some of the LiveJournal days, seeing posts of if anyone has this person's phone number or has a number that I can call their parents or something like that.
You see that in Reddit today. There's a suicide watch subreddit where people who are suicidal will go for, just to have someone to talk to. And there's a lot of posts where you'll read the comments and it's people trying to get in touch with the person or their family. And it's just really sobering. It's this isn't a game. These are real people. And even back then, it was more monumental than people thought.
Because you said, and we said, it was all us. The responsibility was not on, moderators or great leaders in the sky that were thought they're looking out for everyone. It was just we were barely more than kids.
Well, yeah, that brings up the question, at what point does it become almost not inappropriate, but someone else's responsibility? That's the complicated thing with the online friendships that we've had, is that they are real friends, but there's only so much we can do. Because I'm a huge advocate for, harm reduction and mutual aid. Mm-hmm. And you can practice mutual aid online. Just because you can't bring someone dinner doesn't mean you can't send them $25, or whatever. But that only goes so far. It's really limited. Mm-hmm. And for that reason, it is really important to have real life communities if you can, even if it's just one person.
I like that you said, you've been reported multiple times by those ways on social media. And I was thinking, when I did it, people just called the police and they showed up at my door for a wellness check.
Yeah, you did a bonus episode about that.
I mean, I understood why the person did it, but I remember wishing that they had talked to me more, because I felt like I said something flippant that they took literally.
It was online, right?
Yeah. just like messaging them on Facebook Messenger. And I just wish they'd ask, like, can you clarify? Or like, is this what you're planning? And I could have said no, instead of just being like, that's a dangerous statement. I'm going to call the cops on her.
Yeah. Well, and normal people don't know how to deal with those situations either. Like, she could have just been doing the only thing she knew what to do. But that's an example of like what one of you was saying earlier about how you were just children, essentially, like safeguarding these other children. And these are very serious mental disorders we're talking about. Like, it just, as much as I love the support it gives, I am kind of alarmed when people replace, like when people make that their only thing.
Yeah.
I also wanted to ask Vikki another question. When you finally did step back, like what was that process like? Did you get any pushback from people on the site?
You know, I cannot really remember when I did actually step back from it. LiveJournal went from being this booming, thriving community to it just kind of dried up at some point. And
Facebook killed it.
Facebook, MySpace, you know, there were just not as many active users, and it just kind of ran its course. And I actually deleted my LiveJournal. I started a journal at a different site. But I posted before I was going to pull the plug on those communities. You know, does anybody want to take over moderating? Does anyone want to keep these open? I don't think there was anyone who stepped up to do it. So I didn't delete the communities, but they're just out there.
Yeah.
It's the wild, wild west now.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what that LiveJournal is at this point, like one person posts once a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually I did go to another site. It was back when LiveJournal was like taken over by the Russians.
The Russians.
I haven't heard about this.
Well, you weren't much of a LiveJournal person, but yes.
I thought you were going to say you weren't much alive.
At one point, this like Russian group bought LiveJournal.
Yes, and there were all these fears that it was going to become like this censored, horrible place to be. And there were all these people just like mass migrating to this other site. And so I just imported my journal to the other site and I deleted it from LiveJournal. But I was on the other site for quite a while before I realized that there was not an eating disorder community on that site that I could find doing a search. And I actually started one. And it never took off because there's hardly anyone on this other site either. For a while, I posted in there and I tried to drum up support, you know, and I would mention it in my personal journal that it was there. But yeah, there's no activity there. So I kind of forgot. I still own another eating disorder community.
That.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you were kind of thirsty for connection, you know? You didn't, it sounds like you didn't have that coming in from anywhere else.
Yeah, and just seeing that, you know, there might be a need that's not being met in any other way, and maybe people were looking for this kind of community. But, you know, I think unless I really promoted it or tried to get it to be active, it's not going to go anywhere. So.
Yeah, and I get that. I mean, even, you know, Christina and I met on an app called Peach that was started to kind of like take the place of different communities that her and I had both been in. But you know, even that is, and maybe it's showing my age because I just feel like it's okay, but sometimes it just kind of feels like, well, yeah, it's part of the changing generations that are like, I want things fast and I want it in my hand. And it doesn't feel quite as personal as the community I had to leave behind.
It's not the same.
Yeah, so I miss that sometimes.
Yeah, it'll never be the same.
Mm-hmm.
I notice I definitely return to those communities when I'm struggling. Like when I'm doing okay and I have a solid, you know, support system in real life, I don't post as much, or there's even times where I've deleted the apps. And, you know, the last year has been like in crisis mode for the most part. And so I've really been leaning on these communities again. And now it's at the point where I'm like, it's starting to dip back into the other side. But I feel almost this sense of disloyalty when I think of leaving. Yeah. And I think that's one effect that these communities have.
It's like I've never totally left the community that we're on like you did. I've never, you know, like deleted it or anything. But there's definitely times, and I feel like I'm in this time now where I'm just kind of like, yeah, I can go a week and not post anything or not really like pay much attention. I just don't need it the same way.
Do you feel like being involved in those communities helps to keep you stuck? Because
sometimes.
I cannot tell you how many therapists, doctors I've had who said, find things you love, find things that bring you enjoyment, fill your life with those things. Just do whatever it takes to keep your mind off your problems.
Well, shit, maybe we shouldn't have a mental health podcast. But that's different. That's different than...
That is different. But
yeah.
I mean, if you are spending hours a day reading about other people's struggles, comparing them to your own, you're being so introspective, you're putting so much focus on your struggles, and that's time and energy that you could have put towards a hobby or towards spending time with people you love. And so I think it is important to kind of assess, like, is this actually keeping me stuck?
Because thinking of it in the terms of, like the live journal community that she's been talking about, in its heyday, there could be like between 40 and 70 posts a day. And on top of that, people are often leaving like long strings of comments.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you could sit at your computer and you could refresh every 15 minutes and there'd be new stuff for you to read. You could really, just like immerse yourself in that and make it your life if you wanted to.
Well, and I do now. It might not be one single website, but I feel like with my phone, I just wrote about this on Substack. Like, I feel like I'm literally getting dumber by the day. And my outside world that at one point was feeling like it was vibrant and growing, it's starting to shrink again as I relapse and as I, find comfort in these apps and like the social media dopamine and whatever. It's like, it's not real. And I just feel sick and miserable at the end of the day.
But I don't want nothing. Like,
right, exactly.
Because it's like, I don't feel totally like, no, I'm 100% fine. I'm just ready to go out in the world and, none of this is ever going to bother me again.
Well, and the real world doesn't offer the same kind of support all the time. Like, that's the problem. The reason we have these online communities at all is because there is no alternative in the real world for many people.
Yeah.
Well, and I remember a therapist telling me one time I was on disability. I was so depressed. I had no contact with the outside world. I didn't go anywhere. I didn't do anything. And I was just so involved in the online communities, but that was it. And she looked at me and she said, your world has gotten so small. And it just kind of hit me. And I was kind of mad at her for saying that. I'm like, how dare you? But she was right. My world was so small and my focus was on eating disorders and struggles and mental health. And as much as I was trying to make a difference, I was also just trying to stay alive. But, had I maybe taken her advice a little sooner of like filling my life with things that made me happy and that kept me busy and distracted and kept me moving towards something else, I mean, maybe I should have taken that advice a little sooner because I feel like that was good advice.
But like, you do have this sense of loyalty to your community. You can't just drop it like that. That's what people don't get. And you don't even have to get rid of it. Like you said, just like find other things. And then before long, you will have less time for that. And I mean, we've taken breaks on the podcast before when we're struggling. Like, I think you definitely have to have boundaries. And when you are that entrenched, it's really difficult to have boundaries.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. Are there any ways that your experiences with those online communities have like bled over into your real life? Well, obviously, you're sitting in the room with one.
True.
Yes. I don't know. I guess I think it did sort of teach me to think about how words have an impact. I mean, from moderating those posts, I not only had to skim it for numbers or skim it for explicit behaviors or listing off foods that someone ate, but just to have that awareness of like, words matter. And what are these words conveying? And that was something that I took with me. And then just also those connections that you form with people. People you have never met and will never meet, but you cared about them. You hoped to see another post from them because you knew they were struggling and you were praying that they were okay. So those connections, I think it did teach me how important it is to connect with other people.
Yeah. I mean, Lauren and I don't talk about it a lot, but like the community where we met is really important to me. And, Lauren, you too. We have experienced, real life reunions with these people. We have experienced deaths, like Dawn, who it's going to be the 1-year anniversary of her death.
I was thinking about that a lot.
Something popped up in my Facebook memories within the last couple of days, and there was a LiveJournal friend who had committed suicide. And it was about a year after another very close LiveJournal friend had committed suicide. And in this one Facebook post, I listed 6 people who had died within probably the last few years prior. Wow. And it was just really sobering.
Well, and that's the thing, when your entire community consists of people with severe mental illnesses, like the odds go up that you will know people who die earlier, I mean, that's just the facts. And I think that makes it makes me think how important it is to also have like healthy people in your close friend group. Just like for me, sometimes I forget that this isn't normal because all my friends are equally fucked up. And I'm not saying like get better friends,
No, but that's where it's like you have to have additional, like if this is support in your life, great, but you need additional things in your life. That can't be.
Yeah. And maybe there's someone who's even more fucked up than I am. And like, I'm that friend for them, like you just never know who's looking up to you.
Sorry, right. The collar on my coat is not staying down. I'm like, I'm a douche, bro.
I was just thinking, ooh, sporty. I have one final question that both of you can answer, actually. So, people like to romanticize the early 2000s right now. And there's a lot of young people like with eating disorders who are on TikTok and everything. And they might hear these stories and kind of wish they could go back and be part of this world we're describing. What would you tell them?
Well, I think back to that time and it was nonstop drama. It was people backstabbing each other, or there were friends who had other friends like literally print their journal entries and send them to a parent. Were a lot of like crossing boundaries and people unfriending people because I'm in recovery now and I can't be your friend because you're triggering me, and so much drama. Oh my goodness. I mean, so for as much as there were positives, it was also just kind of a crazy toxic environment too. So I would not glorify it. I mean, I miss those connections I had with people and I treasure the connections that I've kept over the years, but would not want to go back.
I would echo that to not wanting to go back. But what I first thought when you asked that is that every generation is just going to have its own way of pulling the same shit and making you feel the same way. Because I was thinking of even like before these things popped up, because as you know, I mean, I started on like the eating disorder behaviors pretty seriously at like 11 or 12. And at that point, my family still did not have internet for a good 5 years. There wasn't as much of a community influence, but I was checking out the same few books that I could find from the library that read like manuals for eating disorders, and I was checking them out over and over again. And then, like if I found a magazine article, clipping it and like making collages out of it and reading it and stuff like that. I was 11. Come on.
Totally normal. Totally normal.
But I mean, then it's just kind of like the only difference is I didn't have people to like bounce this stuff off of. So maybe I was more lonely. But when I just like compare the feelings, like thinking of, myself, like reading these same books and taking notes over and over versus totally unmoderated internet versus moderated and everyone's trying to sneak around it. I just feel like there's the same pain feeling no matter how you're doing it.
So you might as well do it with other people.
Right.
Vikki, is there anything else you want to say to us, to the listeners?
Not about the online community. I hadn't really thought about that in a long time. So this is bringing back a lot of memories of that time. And I started on LiveJournal in 2001. And I think I was super, super active on it probably for a good 12, 13 years. So after that, I moved around a bit. I was, working. I didn't have good internet. So it became less and less that I was even posting, maybe once a month, just to say, hey, I'm still alive. This is what I'm up to. But yeah, I want to say it was a good 12, 13 years that it was a huge part of my life. Posting literally every day.
Mm-hmm.
It really shaped you.
Yeah, and it's actually really, I like the fact that I can look back on my journal and come back to read things, because things get hazy after years go by. You don't quite remember the sequence of events or whatever. And so it's really cool to have that much of your life documented.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even just with this podcast, I'm so grateful to have this, and I think we are really lucky to have that. I mean, some people might say we're unlucky.
But
what is luck?
Exactly. These are the cards we've been dealt. We might as well take advantage of it.
I did want to tell you a very crazy connection to your episode you did about people pleasing.
Oh my God.
I had completely forgotten this memory from childhood, but my parents were very involved in like the charismatic churches that believed in speaking in tongues and being slain in the spirit. And Christians couldn't be possessed by a demon because they had a born again spirit, but they could be oppressed by a demon. And anyway,
okay,
my mom and dad went to a prayer meeting where people were getting prayed for to get the demons exorcised from them. And the next day, my mom was telling us kids that she had had the demon of people pleasing cast out of her. And I had completely forgotten about this, but when I saw that was the topic of your podcast, I'm like, memory unlocked.
Oh, wow.
But the thing that was funny about it, and now I can't remember if it was my little brother or me, but we looked at my mom and we're like, well, that sounds like kind of a good demon to have, though. You're making other people happy.
That's what we were saying. We thought it was a good thing. Oh my God, the demon of people pleasing.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yes. Very off the wall comment, but yeah, it made me laugh because I'm like, I had completely forgotten about that.
That made me laugh. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And thank you for being here again. I could talk for hours more, but y'all have things to do.
Yeah.
Speaking of people pleasing, though, listeners, what would make me and Lauren very pleased is if you left a rating or a review.
Yeah.
We haven't asked for that in a while.
Are we still 5 stars? Or was that only for a day?
No, we're still 5 stars.
Oh, hell yeah. Leave us a 5-star review.
Yeah, the more numbers, the better, right?
Yeah.
That's what they say. So, leave a rating, write us a review, send in a voicemail about how awesome we are. And I guess Merry Christmas.
Sure.
Happy holidays. No, fuck it. It's just a day. It'll be over soon. Live your life.
Enjoy your next week.
Enjoy your week. And stay alive, most importantly.
Yes.
All right. We love you guys, for real.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
If you like what you heard, tell a friend about the podcast. You can direct them to picklesandvodka.substack.com, where you can find our entire back catalog and links to all our social media. We love hearing from our listeners, so send us a voice message at speakpipe.com/picklesandvodka or DM us at Pickles and Vodka Podcast on Instagram. My personal account is at XtinaJumper, and Lauren is at Lauren3_AFH. We'll see you next week.